because they thought their plan was too, long term, and ISIS wanted to start a caliphate right now.
Yeah, sure.
Al-Qaeda broke away from the Muslim Brotherhood. So Ayman al-Zawahiri is inspired by both Syed Qutb and Hassan al-Banna.
I guess my point is with her, it's kind of like I'm coining a term here, like telenovela, American telenovela politics, right? Like I just watched a video of her like rushing into a Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke is like a Texas political figure. He's run for office a couple times and lost every time, right? So I guess he's running now, and she might be running against him in some race in Texas. So she walks into his speech with his thing and is like, "You have blood on your hands," and just like tearing up his campaign sign, and like making all kinds of and it just seems like it's right out of a telenovela, like very dramatic and everything.
Continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, "You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession."
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome back to Christ and Caliphate. On this podcast, we talk about Middle Eastern affairs from a Christian worldview lens, as well as talking about some of the basics of Christianity, Islam, and the ideas that underpin the world around us today. Today, we're going to be covering two topics. One, the US is on the verge of designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. And we're also going to talk about a hoped-for Texas congresswoman and her inflammatory videos. So let's talk about the Muslim Brotherhood here. Is the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, and should the U.S. designate it as a terrorist organization?
Absolutely. I think that unequivocally they are involved in some really shady stuff. I think that their charities operate in plain view, and I think that they become outlets for a lot of hate. And I think that they are just outright involved in funding other organizations that the United States has deemed a terrorist organization.
So, Gio, what's your sort of experience and exposure to the Ikhwan? Ikhwan is the Arabic term for Muslim Brotherhood.
Ikhwan, generally called as Ikhwan al-Muslimin, that is the Muslim Brotherhood, but shortened as Ikhwan. So I think there are many strings attached, or many layers to it. Just outright to say that ban it and call it a terrorist organization, I think it serves some interests, but I think we have to look at holistically on this particular topic. You can't just pick something and say because it doesn't align with the way we see one certain angle doesn't take the whole reality. I say Ikhwan al-Muslimin is doing a lot of groundwork in terms of charity, in terms of helping people. And when I say Ikhwan al-Muslimin, I say that it generally operates in third world countries too. It's in Pakistan, it's in Bangladesh, it's in Misr. Originally, it started from Misr, from Egypt. But saying that there is a lot of good groundwork in Pakistan. I don't know what their hidden motive is, whether they want to take over the whole world. But on the surface, if you ask any single Pakistani in Pakistan about Ikhwan, or there is a different name for them in Pakistan, they would say they're the best. Right? They are the best. Similarly, I don't know about Bangladesh or anywhere else, but I just want to know what are the allegations, or what is something that is taking them to the verge of banning them from doing any kind of charity activities or groundwork.
Okay, so my basic understanding of the Muslim Brotherhood is it comes from Egypt, right? You've got Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna.
Mhm.
These are the kind of, and the premise of the Muslim Brotherhood is to restore the Muslim world to its sort of former state of glory through democratic legal means, eventually restoring and uniting the Muslim world under the Khilafah. In the long run, right? But they publicly disavow like terrorism and violent uprising in most places that they operate, and are trying to use legal means to like holistically advocate for Islam as the solution to everything, right? So the whole premise of the Muslim Brotherhood is Islam is the solution. So the idea is that every single social problem in the Middle East, every single social problem in the world can be resolved by implementing an Islamic system holistically.
Mm-hmm.
And what that results in is an organization that they'll do whatever they can wherever they're allowed to do it.
No, I think. Well, again, I'm speaking purely from what I see them in Pakistan, right? I have not seen them in Masar, or I have not delved deep into to understanding Ikhwan and like at the very core level as an international organization. But talking about Jamaat al-Islamiyya, that is in Pakistan, that is Ikhwan in Pakistan. Number one, they're highly democratic. Highly democratic means there is a system of choosing people who will rule. For example, Amir, it's called Amir. Amir is the leader.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Shura. Shura is council of people.
Yep.
Council of people is selected by members of the Shura, right? So I think that is the most highest degree of democracy, which even it's not in the United States. So to say that that is the only one party in Pakistan that is known for having such a democracy. So when you have such a democracy, then having a strict rules or implementing one particular way is not sounding right with that type of notion where there is democracy. Yes, they believe in Islamic way, but through democracy, not through a dictatorship type of mentality, you know?
Well, I think it's one of these things where they very much believe in voting their way to the solution. But I think democracy in a lot of ways is a means to an end. Now, obviously, there'd be some, sort of democracy. But for example, when the Muslim Brotherhood was, so in the sort of classical Sunni framing, right, you've got the Khilafah chosen by a Shura council, but they're not advocating for absolute freedom of conscience, for example. So when the Ikhwan al-Muslimiyya, the Muslim Brotherhood, was active in the United Arab Emirates, they were trying to challenge the Emirati government for allowing churches on the Arabian Gulf.
Yeah, they're extremist in
Right.
those type of, like, I would say they're very conservative Muslims.
Right. Yes. So the kind of democracy that they kind of like, would ultimately be aligning for is not one that allows ultimate freedom of conscience, right? It's, picking your leaders is something that the Islamic framework, allows for within the Muslim community. Now, whether they would give non-Muslims the right to vote, for example, that remains to be seen.
Agree.
But basically, because they have these overarching goals of implementing Islam everywhere, the argument that places like Saudi Arabia are going to make, which Saudi Arabia has banned it since 2014, I believe.
Saudi Arabia is banning everything that is related to Islam. Saudi is out of the topic in this particular context, because even you can't preach anything in Saudi Arabia, let alone because they are afraid of their own monarch system. So that there are different variables there. Yeah.
But are they banning it because of that, or are they banning it because it's not good? Like, I think that's a viable question. When we were in Saudi, I did not talk to government officials in Saudi. I talked to people in Saudi,
Mm-hmm.
and their impression of the Muslim Brotherhood was very bad. That the government, that they were trying to undermine their stability. And my point on like their presence in Egypt during the Arab Spring was like, well, all right, it's all fine and dandy, and you're advocating for things until you help engineer a revolution and overthrow and overthrow whatever, government popular, government unpopular, whatever. They did take a step outside of being a charitable organization and exercise their like political and economic and their individual like ground game in exerting their will over what happened in Egypt, and then over the unrest in Egypt, and then used it to their end to essentially take over a country. So to me, that's a huge red flag, right? And then on top of that, like speaking about it from Turkey, they operate in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And since they've been operating in Turkey and have a more and more like vocal voice, right? The country honestly has gotten less free. It's gotten less democratic, right? It's gotten more authoritarian and more it's under their influence. And they're also in league with the current government. So when they align themselves with the government, right, and that gives them a seat at the table, things always trend away from like religious freedom, right? So Christianity in Turkey is dwindling. Like it's the lowest numbers ever. People who aren't like ethnic Muslim Turks are being driven out,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and it's not even like, all right, Turkey's like definitely got founded on the idea of being a republic, and the idea of the republic is being erased. And I don't think it's just them, but I do think that they're a player in it. So, I think it's like, this is going to be controversial, but I think it's what like Hizmet would be if they didn't have to be Hizmet, right?
Uh-huh.
If they didn't have to be Hizmet, if Hizmet Turkey could be what Hizmet Turkestan is, you know what I mean? Like if Hizmet was like more authoritarian, like I guess a little bit, I don't know, more aggressive in their take. So I don't, I understand that like they can do good things. Like I think that, but I also think that I don't know if it's centralized, right? So this is my question. Because if it's centralized, right, and there's like a brain trust behind the whole thing, that's one thing. It may operate differently in Pakistan than it does in, Saudi
Say
Arabia or Egypt or Turkey or something like that. So just as a casual outside observer and also being a Turk and watching their involvement in Gulf states and other places in the Middle East. And also I went back and I watched some interesting videos from the 50s and 60s of the Egyptian prime minister having debates with leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood back then
Mm-hmm.
and what they were advocating for. And then you can see a clear progression from what they were advocating for at that point, right? Like women, having like not access to education, right? Like this is Egypt. This is the prime minister. This is the prime minister of Egypt saying these things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like wanting to enforce more Islamic rules, like head coverings and all the other things, which is fine, because in America we have people who are like we had Pat Robertson run for president. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But the thing that happened back then was it was a demand, right? Like there are demands made, and then the secular government is like, we're not going to do that. And then you see a clear line from that line of thinking, and the acceleration of those things to the Islamic Revolution in 1979, which is like the defining changing thing in Islam,
Yeah.
right? Like in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in all of these other places. So
Got 2 points. Sorry to cut you
yeah,
there.
all right.
Yeah, it's like it's building up. So I think there is some really interesting points that I want you guys to just look at it. You talked about Saudi Arabia, both of you. Saudi Arabia has its own state version of Islam. Anything that deviates from it, Saudi is not accepting it. In their mosques, sermons are issued by the government. In their anything that is Islamic has to have a straight approval.
Turkey's like that too.
You can't do that without state's approval,
Mhm.
right? So state is very, very strict in controlling because, of course, they're afraid of uprising in any segment of Islam. Islam is the biggest catalyst in that Muslim world to cause an uprising. point number 2, going back to Pakistan or any Muslim country, if they want to impose Sharia on them by the will of, if, for example, why I believe in that. So Jamaat al-Islami, that's the organization called, right? They are not elected in Pakistan because Pakistanis don't want Islamic system, most of them, right? That's why they're not elected. Say Jamaat Islami comes in power, it means people support them, people want them. And if they want to implement laws of Islam, go ahead, do that. I'm not against it because that's the will of the people. I'm not here to tell what you need to do. As long as you're not coming after me, as long as you're not shooting guns at me and saying, hey, I'm going to come and take over this place. As long as you restrict yourself to a particular place and implement whatever system you want to implement, I'm okay with that. I have no problem. Right? That was point number 2. Point number 3 about Turkey you mentioned, right? And Egypt, how it was back in. So I would give it an example of like United States itself. In 60s, how things were. You know that how big of a revolution we went through. Martin Luther King Jr., a big name in 60s and 70s, segregated education system, women rights, and
desegregated.
Yeah, it was segregated, and then it kind of like, and those things that happened. And so America also went through a big transition in terms of like where they were before 60s versus how those gradual changes affected. So I think in that context, things change over 30, 40, 50 years. So does the ideologies. It gets lenient and more easy, I guess.
So I think when I think about this, there's a sort of an ideological chain, but basically, ISIS broke away from Al Qaeda because they thought their plan was too, long term, and ISIS wanted to start a caliphate right now.
Yeah, sure.
Al Qaeda broke away from the Muslim Brotherhood. So Ayman al-Zawahiri is inspired by both Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna, but basically sees their methodology as too
Lenient,
moderate,
yes.
too lenient, too moderate, right? Too lenient. It's like you're not taking action fast enough. We need to take more drastic actions to achieve our goals. So we have to at least give credit where credit is due. That the Muslim Brotherhood is not Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, but what it is it does believe in a complete changing of the system of the Muslim world from top to bottom. It does believe in that, and it's advocating for that. So if you're Saudi Arabia or UAE, you're not betraying any of your stated principles to say, no, you're not allowed to advocate for complete overthrow of the current system of things. We will not tolerate any of your activities. That's kind of, it's fair, actually. The question is, though, in America, where freedom of speech, freedom of conscience is a key sort of founding stated principle,
which is these days being in question. So that is just to say, I mean, like it's been freedom of speech for a long time, but nowadays
I would say it's always been in question. I mean, the thing about it is the idea, if you look at like the trajectory, the course of the cases that the Supreme Court has heard about free speech, they've been hearing those cases since the 40s, since the 30s, like the idea of free speech has always been something that gets, kind of pulled back into court every, I don't know, decade or something like that. Right. So I don't think it's ever really just like,
there was a free speech. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's always like, what is free speech? Right. Like, once the newspapers started like printing things about like Hitler, for instance, there was a significant number of people in America who didn't want to hear that. So people would sue, and then that would wind up in the court system. Right. And then, once we got to Vietnam and Korea and all this other stuff, people were like, well, we don't like being involved in Korea. So, they would be suppressed and they would sue. We have a legal system where you can do that.
Yeah.
So
So I basically make the argument.
But I would agree with you in the idea is that like things have gotten more pitched since the 60s, right?
Yes.
Like since the Cultural Revolution of the 60s.
So basically, what I would say the problem we're trying to deal with here is that I don't think the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization in the traditional sense, right? There's branches of it which veer into that.
Yeah, or tendencies.
Tendencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as a sort of centralized or decentralized system, it's like it doesn't quite fit into that category. So terrorist organization is the closest thing America has for a legal framework that could actually deal with it. In reality, what it is it's a transnational organization dedicated to undermining the existing world order with the goal of supplanting it with a new one. And I don't think we have a good legal framework for dealing with those things in America. So even like when we were at that UW protest, we have those kids arguing that their goals are number one, ceasefire; number two, dissolution of the state of Israel; goal three, dissolution of the United States. Right. And so like being there's like a legally recognized American Communist Party.
Yeah.
Even despite us fighting a whole like Cold War with the communists about that's still
right.
Like
it's crazy.
Legal.
Yeah. I mean, we have Nazism like openly embraced for, I don't know, like almost let's just say white supremacist tendencies, like, embraced for a very long time here in lots of different places. So, yeah. But I think my main question, I haven't done like enough research on it for the justification in this instance, is I think that if they're following the money and they have a reason to ban them, then I want to see that reason, right? Like I want to see the receipts. I want to see why you're calling this, like if there are transactions, like financial transactions going in places, right? Like the long term accusation by governments that have kicked them out is that they are a money laundering organization.
Yeah.
Right? Like they take a lot of money in from a lot of different places and they send it to places, and it looks shady from the outside. And then when you try and press them on their books or something like that, it's like, it's a moving target, right? Like, the money's going through Egypt, through Turkey, then to Qatar, then to, you know what I mean? Like different places. Afghanistan, all these different places. And it's got the guise of like, well, we're digging wells, right? But, there is a lot of people calling that into question. And my hope would be that the United States would say, we have actual like evidence, and this is what we're basing our decision on. And, I would like to see that. I mean, just as being an objective person, right? Like maybe they're not nefarious, right? Like maybe they're just on the other end of the ideological spectrum, and then you have to deal with that, through politics, right? Like with the Communist Party or something like that. But if there are receipts, then no, they got to go.
Yeah, and also I would like to add one thing, which is kind of related to that, is there are three systems in the world according to a Muslim brain, right? There is capitalism, there is communism, and there is Sharia, right? So for them, communism is not working, capitalism is Western, and it's not aligning with how they think of certain things, right? There is too much of freedom there. There is too much of I would say, interest-oriented, banks-oriented, the way it is to make richer people more rich and poor more poor. That's the idea of capitalism in their mind. So the escape route for them is the Islamic way, and I think that is imaginary. That doesn't have any legs to stand upon in reality.
I would agree with you.
Yep.
Right, and that is fantasy. That they're living in a fantasy that Muhammad's time or Abu Bakr's time or Omar's time was the best time, where poors were taken care of, and there was like everybody was in. Yes,
I noticed you skipped Uthman.
Well, yes, Abu Bakr, Omar. After Omar comes the Uthman, so you just give me enough time to go to it. Right? But that being said, there's a mindset. And that mindset is just imagining imaginary world, which is 1400 years ago almost, doesn't have any realistic implementation to this day. And then this Jamaat al-Islamiyah or Ikhwan al-Muslimin is exactly targeting that type of people who are frustrated by communism and capitalism and want to change. And the change is just imaginary, which is not realistic. So that's how I will conclude my point that Ikhwan al-Muslimin, I agree with him. If you want to ban them, bring the receipts, show the links that they are funding terrorism and so on and so forth. If so, then they deserve justice.
I had a great conversation with some friends of mine the other day, and we were talking about how information has changed since the pandemic, right? And we got in a long and kind of heated discussion about masks. You know, they're more left than I am, right? So they were like, no, they absolutely did this and they did that. And you know, the truth is the truth has come out over time. So what we were told in the 20s and in the early 2020 is different than what we're being told now. And what I was asserting is that there were elements of what we're being told now that they knew in 2020, right?
Mhm.
But it was like we have to prevent a panic. We can't trust people with the truth, right? And my thing is that just give us the truth. Just give us the truth and let us decide what to do with it, right? Like the more and more that you're sitting there trying to protect me from the truth or insulate me from the truth or something. So it might be crazy, but let's be as transparent as possible, right? Let's be transparent with these decisions. Let's have like a whole section of the State Department website signed off by Marco Rubio and whoever else his undersecretary is of what their actual rationale is. Show me the case. And then, to quote Jerry Maguire, show me the money. You know what I mean? Show me the money.
So I think with anything like the Muslim Brotherhood, I would think of it like a sort of cancer. But anytime you're like removing a tumor, you have to be really, really, really careful and precise when you remove something like that.
Right.
And so the problems with the Muslim Brotherhood cannot be implemented onto every single person who has some sort of connection to it. You've got to really target the kind of operatives that deserve to be targeted, and not like, so in Egypt, for example, this is what we kind of see is we see a lot of collateral damage. So I have a friend who's, younger brother who's like 19 has been in jail for 2 years for like posting kind of like pro Muslim Brotherhood memes kind of thing. And that while, the Egyptian government is probably doing quite well to stamp down on the Muslim Brotherhood as a general rule, some 19-year-old kid posting memes is not, is not the way you deal with that.
Yeah, it's not worthy of, like, who knows how long his term is for, right? Is it
Right,
indefinite?
right. We don't know. We don't know.
I
And
mean, in America, somebody would sue you. That's the difference,
right.
right? Like,
And I would say this, James, that I would prefer Ikhwan over a cruel Muslim dictator. And why I say this, that at least Ikhwan believe in a democratic system of election within them. They can be held accountable within the council, within the Sharia, or Shura, which is not Sharia, within the Shura. But comes a dictator, right? Like Pakistani General Asim Munir. He's a current dictator of Pakistan. Right? There's a puppet government. Let's not get into it. Behind the doors, he is the one controlling everything, right? And he's very, very opinionated on many, many things, right? So I would rather prefer this Ikhwan or Jamaat al-Islamiyah to rule the government rather than a crazy Muslim dictator, right? So banning such organization will come with certain downsides, which will be beneficial for one particular country, say United States, but it will have catastrophic effects on its very own country, which is working on, if you see it from that particular lens. That's my take.
Yeah. So this is a delicate and complicated process which needs a lot more ideological nuance and intelligence than, hey, let's just,
Yeah,
ban
it's
everything.
not as simple, just like it's just stick in, you are done, right?
Right.
Unless you have receipts.
All right.
So moving on from how to reasonably counter the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood, we are going to look at the proposed solution of a hopeful Texas Congresswoman, Valentina Gomez.
Muslims have raped over 1 million girls in the UK and have cut off the heads of innocent Christians in Syria because they refuse to bow down to their stupid rock. And the very same fate awaits your sons and daughters unless you send me to Congress, because I'm the only one who's not afraid of them. I'm going to be very honest with you. I didn't have the blessing of being born in America or even call myself a Texan, but you can't tell me that I don't care about Texas. The clowns in the Texas House allowed for a bunch of radical Muslims to take over entire cities. Now, they're trying to turn Texas from a Christian state into the Muslim capital of America. So let me be very clear. America is a Christian nation. So these Muslims can to any of the 57 Muslim nations. Islam has no place here.
Brother,
The caption is,
In the UK and have
and the caption is, I will end Islam in Texas once and for all.
Yes. Tell me how you really feel. Don't hold back.
that's a brother moment, kind of like, gosh.
What was your last name again?
Valentina Gomez.
Yeah, she's
Cocaine Valentina.
She has an accent like me, which
She's Colombian.
will.
Which just, again, not to paint all Colombians with this brush, but oh my word, she seems like a Narcos character.
Didn't she lose her?
No, she was higher in drugs these days, or
What?
something. But that's the fun part, I guess. This is just belligerent. I think I don't have words to explain what she is doing here, right? It is Islamophobic, number one, right? At one side we say ban anti-Semitism, ban this and that, no hate towards one particular religion. Then this is exactly the same idea that we are voicing against, right? So this type of things, I think, yes, it just to gain some popularity on the internet because people like controversial stuff. People like to listen to those type of things. But in reality, I think if you're looking for a progressive way of seeing things, this type of girls don't hold any place in that type of role, I believe.
I'm triggered by the word progressive, but in general, I agree with you.
Yeah, progressive. When I say progressive, it's not in a political term, but in terms of like we got to progress forward. So that's what I think progressive means to me.
So one thing is she talks a big game here, but she does not provide any legal mechanism by which she's going to do what she's saying she's doing, right? It's all very vague, right? It's like Islam is this existential threat, and the way we're going to solve this existential threat is by sending me to Congress. And I don't hear a plan there. I just hear a
Yeah, I think there are a lot of voices that are similar to hers, right? And I think when they say, like, let's talk particularly about Texas in this context, because she mentioned about Texas, right? When did you realize that Muslims are taking over Texas? What is the population numbers of Muslims in Texas? Even it's not 2% of the total population, even that less than 2%. In what world 2% of people can influence 98%? How that fits into rationality? Okay, they're going to use power. Oh, you think Muslims are so strong that they're going to come with guns in the United States? Texas is not able to defend themselves. Okay, they're going to go in the Constitution and change the rules. Again, 2% over 98%. Are you in your real senses? So I think for me, that girl is just a clown, just a joker, and nothing else.
So I think probably a large part of what's triggered this is the whole Epic City thing. You remember we did a podcast,
Yes.
right?
Yes, on Epic City.
But even what she's saying there, the Texas government kind of did shut that down. it's still in process, but the Texas government is using basically kind of all legal means to try and push back on the project and, you know, stop it from happening. Now, anything more than that is going to be illegal. It's like you can't, if you start saying, okay, well, this sort of Muslim project in Texas is such a threat to our way of life that we need to, like, basically use some extrajudicial force of some kind in order to stop it, then you're kind of basically going into the ends justify the means territory, and that's super, super dangerous, and that's exceeding the mandate of what the government should be able to do. If Muslims are gaining influence in America in ways that makes people uncomfortable, then we shouldn't really be looking at Muslims as a problem. We should actually be looking internally at our own failure to organize and put out a cohesive vision that is appealing to people, that is actually interacting with people properly, and not sort of scapegoating foreigners and people from a different worldview for that.
I mean, I'm kind of looking at. I was just looking at some of her other social media posts, and it, I'm trying to be like respectful here, right? Because I think she's earnest and she probably believes that stuff, you know. And I've talked to people um, who like, are let's just say jihad friendly over the past like couple of years. But they're earnest, right? They are like, well, Taliban are not bad. They made Afghanistan so safe now, right? So, but they believe it. So I'm trying to be respectful here.
You remember that guy we met in Florida, and he was like pro Taliban. Oh, they made it more peaceful now, and Caesar's like, yeah, but they killed my uncle. It's like, oh yeah, what did you do to deserve it, right?
Right. You know what I mean? So I guess my point is with her, it's kind of like I'm coining a term here, like telenovela, American telenovela politics, right? Like I just watched a video of her like rushing into a Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke is like a Texas political figure. He's run for office a couple times and lost every time, right? So I guess he's running now, and she might be running against him in some race in Texas. So she walks into his speech with his thing and is like, "You have blood on your hands," and just like tearing up his campaign sign, and like making all kinds of like, and it just seems like it's right out of a telenovela, like very dramatic and everything. Listen. She ran for Secretary of State in Missouri in a primary on the Republican side and got 7.5% of the vote. That's not insignificant. She lost, and there was a big field, right? But like the winner only got 34. So first of all, what does that tell you about how people are responding to the fear of like creeping Sharia or creeping Islam or something like that? And the other point is that, listen, she's either super devoted to this cause or she's super ambitious, right? And maybe those two things are aligning. And because how do you run for Secretary of State in Missouri in 2024 and then run for something else in Texas in 2025, right? So to me, it kind of comes off as like dude, just go to Alabama. They'll totally back you. Right? Like if you've ever watched a video of the governor of Alabama, like talking about how she fulfilled her campaign promises, like, they wanted CRT in our schools. I banned it. They wanted to take away concealed carry. I made constitutional carry legal. Like she just, this old lady doesn't care, just shouts it out. There's similarities to what this this woman is doing, like what she's doing and how dramatic the whole thing is. So
I think it's very progressive that America's most xenophobic statements coming from foreigners. That's progress.
Oh my gosh.
I would say one more thing in the midst of the fun and jokes around. I said one thing. You mentioned the two sides. I mentioned the third side. is to gain popularity very, very fast. That's one way. I think when you are negatively portraying, or when you're using these type of tools, it is very, very common that you rise up the ranks very fast. So I think that's what she's doing there.
I mean, she's like a cross between the telenovela and a flash mob, and like an Instagram live post.
So-
Right? Like, how can I fit all of these things into a minute and a half? Right?
So my prediction here is that on the internet, these kind of things gain you popularity. I actually think when it comes to the voting booth, people are gonna be like, fine.
Yeah.
But so I think, there are people like this out there, but I think you can kind of take comfort in the fact that they are kind of fringe at this point in time, right? Those could become less fringe, but people who are like not there, this should be a warning to like moderate Republicans. And the warning should be, if you have kind of unpaid debts to things like this, right? If people have concerns about like Islam as a force in society, you've got to be able to have a concise, thoughtful, realistic answer that's able to differentiate between people who are like nefarious and people who are, normal, well contributing citizens, and have got to be able to outline that clearly. It's the same thing with the Muslim Brotherhood. This has to be surgical, it has to be thoughtful, and it has to be addressed in this kind of way. And I don't think in America right now we're in any real danger from Islam as a political force.
But I would say one thing here, and what she mentioned, and that's very important for us to understand. The problem in the Muslim world is union of state and religion. The way America progressed, I think one of the aspects, not everything, was the separation of state versus religion. Religion operates on its own, states is separate. I think when she talks about those things, saying America is a Christian country, I agree. America is a country without a state religion, but it is lived by majority Christians. And the rules that have been made in the context of those people who live here, right? But saying that a Christian country is just like saying Afghanistan is a Muslim country, right? When you combine those two things together, I think then you are setting up stage for something that's not going to give you good result in not present day, but in the future, upcoming future.
Well, I think when she's talking about, America as a Christian country, again, I also agree with that. But okay, well, let's implement biblical thinking in this, right? If America being a Christian country is just used as a, start with being a Christian person and stop talking about people that way, right? Telling people to F off back to Muslim countries is not the way a Christian should be treating foreigners. And that doesn't mean we let people from other worldviews like walk over us and like change our laws and institutions, right? But to disrespect people like that, just on a basic level, is not Christian.
Sure.
Jesus never treats people that way. The Torah never instructs us to treat people that way. We're told to love foreigners, to be kind to foreigners, to show hospitality to strangers, right? That's a code. And we can easily strike balance of holding the line of our laws, values, morals, and institutions, and providing a welcome space for people from different systems to live here and be here, with some lines that can't be crossed, but nevertheless is a good place for people to live.
Yeah.
I think that she just, in a lot of ways, and I don't think she's the only one. I think that there are a lot of Christians who don't understand, like, the way that Jesus views nation states and the way that he views kingdoms. They rise, they fall, but he's still King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he sits on the throne forever. Nothing's going to change that. And, I think that when you start getting defensive about, the country that you live in, to the point where you're like willing to do what she's doing, you've walked away from some really core key Christian beliefs, right? It's not just like love your God, love your neighbor. At this point, it's like you are advocating the thought that God is in control, and that you can still have your integrity and run, right? You can still run compassionately, you can still run on issues, you can still try and affect culture that way. But I just don't see, like, I don't see the need for a Christian to capitalize on fears. I spoke in a church in Dallas once, and I did the Almeida session after, and I got a lot of questions about what was happening before there was an Epic City. So it was a huge swell of like Muslims moving into the North Dallas area where I was speaking, and people were concerned. And I'll say this: why were they concerned? Were they concerned because they were Muslims? I don't think so. I think they were concerned because they weren't acting like Texans. They weren't integrating. Like, they would try to talk to them and be like neighborly to them, and they would feel shut out. So it was very much like a closed society. And my commercial for what we do, right, is that there needs to be more of what we do in places like Texas, right? Is with the Almeida Initiative, like, we try and foster conversations and worldview conversations and like friendships between Christians and Muslims so that we can bridge this communication gap. And I think, like, that is, I think, the main thing that's missing. So if you were to sit down with, I'm not going to say the C word, Valentina, the illegal drug reference, Valentina. I got in trouble for saying a word last week on the podcast.
I don't know if cocaine is a censored word. We'll try it.
Bro, we saw Cocaine Bear. It was a work of art.
No, that was a good movie.
Great movie. So if we were to sit down with her and show her, I think that she needs to be shown a better way. Right? And I think
she knows the better way. It's just
maybe, but you know what? You think that people know, right? But then, like, we run into people all the time who don't know.
That's true.
You know what I mean? And we're like, we're in like super progressive, open-minded, tolerant Washington. And we still run into people who don't understand that there are other ways to communicate with people outside of a, framed path. So I think that people will say, like, I'm so progressive and I think this way, right? Or I'm so conservative and I think this way. But that leads you to huge blind spots, like ideologically, in how you communicate with people as a Christian, even how you love people, right? How you would deal with a Muslim, because the second you're hit with this thing that you do not see in your blind spot, you respond reflexively. And I mean, that's just my short commercial for what we do.
Yeah. So I would say, to wrap this up, if somebody wants to end Islam in Texas, right, there's legal things you could do, right? You could make sure you're having stricter enforcement against polygamy. You could make sure that you're keeping a tight watch and making sure people aren't, controlling the lives of their adult children, right? Things that, are already illegal here, right? You're making sure you're enforcing existing US laws properly. But but Islam does not exist primarily as a legal system. Islam primarily exists in people's hearts and minds. And you don't have the power to change hearts and minds. And every time you try and do that through law, through force, through coercion, it is going to backfire.
And then it puts you in the same place where you critique Muslim world of enforcing something in you.
Right, exactly, right.
We're gonna beat their Islam with our Christianity.
Yeah. That's not how it works.
That's
not how Christianity wins. So if you want to see Christianity win in Texas, you have to act like a Christian, which would mean thinking carefully about
maybe
Islam.
not telling people to F off.
You're thinking carefully about like Islam, understanding the people that you disagree with, showing hospitality and kindness and reason to the people you disagree with, and ultimately leaving the changing of hearts and minds to God himself, right?
Right.
So as Christians, our job should be to love our Muslim neighbors, to seek the welfare of our Muslim neighbors, to accurately represent the views of our Muslim neighbors, and yes, to accurately communicate the truth in love to our Muslim neighbors and leave the results to God. And our Muslim neighbors should have nothing to fear from us as Christians. They should feel safer with us than they do with anyone else. So thank you for listening to Christ and Caliphate. We'll be back next time.